All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Patchstack Helpers. You may be wondering, what is Patchstack Helpers and what is the series going to be about? So, let me give you a brief introduction. Patchstack Helpers is going to be an ongoing series of interviews highlighting people involved in open source, web application development, security research, event organization, education, and more. But generally speaking, we're looking to highlight people who help others in the open source web community. We need to answer too, who is a helper? A helper can mean anybody who helps open source projects, either directly, like main contributors, or helpers could also mean somebody who helps out other members of the same community. Anyone who helps anyone else is considered a helper, and we would love to have them as a guest. Many helpers out there have great stories to tell. And we're looking to share stories that have not been told from underrepresented people or from non traditional forms of help, just as long as we have a guest who is willing to share their firsthand experiences. If you're joining the live stream, please feel free to chime in chat. You can just say hi, or you can feel free to ask questions during your conversation, and we'll be glad to answer them. Don't be shy. This inaugural episode, the first episode, will be with Oliver Sild, CEO of Patchstack. Oliver also co-founded a co-working space and a hacker space in Pärnu, Estonia, and is a believer in the power of community. So hello, Oliver. Thank you for joining.
Hello, Robert. You actually pronounce Pärnu quite well.
I
I'm surprised.
practiced it. I practiced it
Okay.
multiple times.
Okay. Cool. That makes sense. That makes sense.
I probably only did okay at it, but thanks for that. So Oliver, would you mind sharing a little bit about your background story? What got you like? I'm assuming like you're from Estonia, you grew up there, or basically what got you into hacker spaces, starting co-working spaces, and also Patchstack.
Yeah, crazy story, right? I am from Estonia. I was actually originally from another city, which is even smaller, where I'm living right now. Right now, I'm living in a small town with like 30,000 people, which is happens to be the summer capital of Estonia. So kind of like a resort. We have or like a resort town. So we have like a really big beach, and like in the summertime, there's a lot of going on. Um, but yeah, I kind of like got into cyber in general from video games, as many people probably, you know, I think it's a common way to get into it. Had to run private servers and then protect them, and also get the players to our servers, and was kind of Wild West, right? And then yeah, at one point I was actually running a digital agency, building websites, trying to also find our own niche. So the niche in our case was to build websites with security in mind already from the get-go, because we already saw so many websites being defaced, hacked, all the traffic being, redirected to some places that nobody wants them to be redirected, and so forth. And at one point, yeah, like this, I kind of realized that in a point that it's actually not like a problem only in terms of for us. Like the problem is for quite a big community, especially in the WordPress community right now. And at that point, when I started, WordPress was just going to, starting to get off. And yeah, basically decided that the solution that we are kind of building needs to be given to all the agencies and not just for us. And that ended up being Patchstack, as providing tools for agencies to be able to tell whether the websites that they build for their customers are secure, what needs attention, and to actually prevent attacks and incidents from happening. I guess like the hackerspace side and the co-working space side is kind of falls into a little bit of a philanthropy. So I was when I did start in Pärnu, in the small city in Estonia, there was literally like no startup community or like no entrepreneurship community that in that sense. So I just kind of with few of our friends ended up kind of building one, and that has actually become like an entrepreneurship hub at this point. We just in February moved to bigger kind of office space, and the community has grown a lot over the time. And hackerspace was kind of came out of the same kind of way. We started organizing CTF competitions into co-working space, which was kind of like my own personal, I would say, interest to do those, and I was like very inspired to do those. So I've been
So
doing these for 3 years. Yeah,
CTFs. Let's define what those are
yeah,
for those that don't
indeed.
understand. Capture the flags. I know what they are, but go ahead and give me your quick definition if you'd like.
Yeah, sure. Like these are some of the things that I missed when I went to school, when I studied like computers and networking. CTFs is basically like capture the flag event where we have vulnerable machines, vulnerable web applications, like cryptographic challenges, stuff like that. And we basically invite like a bunch of people together, and then we have like 3 hours session where they need to basically hack or get access to those things, or solve those puzzles, and they get points. So we had like competitions. We've been organizing these competitions for 4 years, and that kind of gradually turned into, hey, we should make a hackerspace where we have different kind of like hardware events as well, additionally to the CTFs themselves.
Nice. So a place to run the CTFs. They can't be virtual, but you have a place to run and operate your systems. And the goal of these CTFs is seems like education, right? You're trying to
Yeah, definitely.
share knowledge and get people, up on their skill sets, especially with information security stuff. It's sort of like a proving ground. Uh, Very cool. So like this is a mixture of community coming together to share knowledge with one another, as well as um, really like coaching and showing people like how to do new skill sets. Is that right? Like, is that part of what this hackerspace and these co-working spaces bring together?
Yeah, like the co-working space itself is like the rooms themselves, or like the desk that you can rent there. I mean, it has no value without the community around it. People who
Mhm.
go to co-working spaces, they go there for the community, for the additional value that they get from from the other people that are around, and like bouncing ideas off each other, and like that's the real value there. I guess with the hacker space, I was kind of missing a lot on when I went to school. I missed a lot of those events, and like I was like very much into cybersecurity, so I had to find my own ways of how to kind of use my skills and to, kind of practice and do things. But at the same time, I could imagine people going in the very wrong direction when doing so. So I think hackerspaces are a very important part of giving the maybe the younger generation as well, or like people who just get into cybersecurity, like a safe playing ground to kind of test their skills and have like a place to see how things work without
Mhm.
doing something illegal. So I think
Yeah.
that's very, very important.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's a critical way to learn. It's something that's hard to learn, hacking and security information, like so information security tasks. There's no real strong schooling for it, especially a while ago when I was coming up. But nowadays they have some classes for it, and it's funny is the college system in the U.S. Already has collegiate cyber defense systems, right?
Mm.
They have competitions themselves, so the colleges are even starting to adopt things that came from the ground up, right? Came from the community, right? You started CTFs, which are challenges, and you taught people through using those, and then people in the US also see these happening at colleges now, where the colleges are building out competitions to basically see who's the best, or at least apply these skills that they've learned, the theoretical skills in the classroom, to actual real life scenarios. With that takes a lot of effort and it takes a lot of work. So did you do all this alone, or have you had help, or have you had mentors or anything like that?
Yeah, I definitely didn't do those alone. It would be like a massive undertaking to do that all alone. So for the co-working space, when we started the co-working space, there was actually five of us. So one of the another co-founder who we built this together was having another like his own company. So he's building like a game studio in the same city where I am right now. So we kind of like both had our own offices. Like I had one office on one end of the street, and he had like his office on other end of the street. And like eventually, like discussing everyone discussing all that together, we realized that, I mean, that's pointless to have different offices in such a, like, especially when you're like a 2 or 3 man company at this point. So we decided to kind of, whatever we were investing into building, or like paid for our office rent, we decided to put all that into the budget of creating this co-working space. This co-working space, by the way, is an NGO. So it's a non-profit organization. So we base, like, everyone in there is a volunteer basically.
Nice.
And the community is kind of self, how to say, like it's kind of like autonomous. But at this point, we also have like, I think we have like 1 or 2 employees there now. The CEO who is running the everyday operations, and additionally who are building like a project-based stuff for with different NGOs and so on. But yeah, even with hackerspace as well, with the hackerspace and starting organizing the CTFs, there was a lot of help also from the local there's a friend of mine who is he's a teacher in the local vocational school. So he's teaching IT security specialists and he's teaching like computer networking and stuff like that. So and the other guy, like three of us that we built the hackerspace together and started the CTFs. The other guy was also a teacher in the same school. They were both teachers for the IT. We even made together like a curriculum in the local vocational center, or like how it's called. I think it's vocational centers, like where you go and it's like
This is like a school, but not like a college. Like you learn skills and trades.
I think it's trade school, I think is the right word actually. So yeah, like we even like opened together like a IT security specialist curriculum there, which people could study for 2 years.
Nice.
Which was the first one in Estonia, so it was opened in our town.
Nice.
But yeah, like all of that required a lot of people, a lot of community engagement as well. Like the people who actually came to the co-working space, who came to the hackerspace, they had equal amount of contribution to making that happen.
So as I understand it, you basically had a group of friends or people who knew each other, and you all helped each other out in different ways. It wasn't a one-directional thing. You received help from people who work at the vocational school, and then you gave help back, helping them build the curriculums that they need. And then in turn, you're helping even a bigger community because now you've got a bunch of students who are learning the vocation, the security, information security. And now in 2 years, when they graduated from that, they could come back and then help you out because perhaps they've learned something that you don't know or haven't learned. I think that's great. I mean, I think like the bigger picture I'm trying to explain here is that community can be something that's not formal, not structured. It can be very ambiguous, but then somehow it comes back and helps each other out as long as the same goal of working towards goals and helping each other out is part of the core tenet of the personalities involved. Do you have any thoughts on community though, online versus in person?
Interesting. I think the online communities sometimes are, I think they're easier to build in the beginning, but they are way harder to get more like intimate. Like in the co-working space, like I can see how intimate the community is. Like there is like an actual feeling of a family. They not only spend time together, work related, but they go like kite surfing together and do all those different things together and like have bake cakes together and whatever, right? So it's like all those different things that go on top of that. I think but at the same time, especially lately when I like Patchstack, for example, we are like fully distributed company. I'm here in Estonia, Robert, you're in the US. But at the same time, I think all the technology that is available today for community engagement has made like the borders way more kind of, to kind of fade away in a way. So I think it is getting kind of similar already in terms of like having an online community and like a physical.
Like there's really is no such thing as a purely online or a purely like 100% in person, right? In person, I'm sure you use online communications, right? Maybe a discussion board or a Slack channel for your in-person co-working spaces to communicate and record the information you have. Perhaps that's also one of the great values of the internet, right? Like you have a record, right? You can have a log, you can see how a question was answered in the past for an online community. Quora, Stack Overflow are great examples of only online communities because they're a record of people answering other people's questions, people helping one another out. But you make also a great point that, there has to be, or I shouldn't say there has to be, I should say that there is great value in being the in-person, right? Being able to participate in non-work related, just play or, social aspects of a community helps the individuals in the community grow. Do you have any more that you wanted to mention on about your experiences starting these communities, hacker spaces, or perhaps mentorship? Any help that you received or given to other people?
I guess like what I've done over the years is also going on hackathons as kind of and this is more from entrepreneur side or like a business mentoring. Because I mean, starting a company has been quite a challenge, right? So over the times, it's a massive roller coaster, basically going up and down. So seeing people with new cool ideas and like kind of inspiring them to just take the leap of faith and just start and see where it takes you, is something that I've been trying to maybe inspire people who have maybe, or like who need some additional pushing from the outside. So um, being mentor on hackathons is definitely something that has been like very good way to kind of give out also like the things that I've learned over the years. But at the same time, it is also very, very valuable as what you get back from there in terms of the feedback, in terms of like, the energy, like the exchanging of energy, I would say, is like something that you feel there.
Mhm.
But I mean, yeah, we can also get into Patchstack Alliance, but this is another part of the community. I guess like now when you've asked me those questions, I start feeling that like everything that I do is basically somewhat connected to building communities or somewhat like community related,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
is interesting.
of course. Yeah. So, but you mentioned entrepreneurship. Let's switch a little bit before we get into Patchstack Alliance, because that's part of Patchstack, something that company you help get running. And so your entrepreneurship, when you look at entrepreneurship, or for yourself or for others, what do you look at for what makes a good business idea versus a bad business idea? Or what's the hurdles that you face before you get started, or would encourage somebody to get started?
To be honest, like in terms of ideas, usually, or like at least based on my experience, the idea doesn't really matter in the beginning, because like even when I started what Patchstack is today, like in the very, very beginning, it was not that idea. Probably like it is like there's very like not a lot left from the original idea when we started building things. And like not even talking about what we actually have, like we have rebuilt stuff, we have like changed our approaches, all that kind of stuff over the years. So I don't think that the idea in the very beginning matters that much. I think
Mhm.
what matters way more is like just getting started and figuring out what the first step is, and then on the road figuring out like where it takes you and like how you can kind of adapt while you learn new stuff, because
Yeah.
it's all about learning eventually, right? I mean, you do something, you figure out that didn't work, you need to then basically adapt, uh, change your plan, do something different, figure out that maybe that didn't work either. And
Yeah.
unless maybe 10, 15 times you try something that doesn't work, and then one thing works, and then it's a cycle. um, yeah.
So is Patchstack Alliance one of those things that worked?
I think Patchstack Alliance, by the way, Patchstack Alliance in the beginning was named Plug
Oh, yeah.
Bounty, I think, and
Okay.
then we called it Patchstack Red Team, and then now it's Patchstack Alliance. So it's the same thing, right? Like
A
even though
continuous
maybe
evolution, right?
we even built like an MVP version of the Plug Bounty platform, I think back in 2019 or something, and then we realized that, well, I mean, there's no point of like building it out and then starting to test the idea. So we basically, I mean, what we built back then, we basically just scrape it down and start from the beginning right now. Or like we started working from the beginning again. So it's the same thing. It's with everything, right? It's with the Patchstack product itself. It's with the Patchstack Alliance. It's with the Patchstack database. With all those things, it evolves all the time, and the original idea, the original idea still stays there in terms of what you want to solve, and like what like the overall goal is, but the ways to get there are changing all the time.
Mm. Oh, nice. So, if you don't mind sharing, right? So, the Patchstack Alliance's goal, right, which is just a subset of what Patchstack does. Um, what is that goal? What is the problem it's solving?
I guess I can tell you like where the original idea came from in terms of when we first called it Plug Bounty. The thing was that like Patchstack was already providing like a security auditing service for plugin developers. So if a plugin developer came to us, and we would spend our time to basically do the full code review on that, read the entire thing, do all the kind of different tests that we do, and give them report, and help them to improve the security on their plugins. But that only works for the plugins who have good monetization schemes, who have like a business model behind them. But when we are looking at the open source, and if we are looking at like a grand scale, a lot of plugins don't actually have cash flow to be able to afford professional pen testing services. So at the same time, we were like thinking, how can we solve that? The same thing is with bug bounty programs, like the traditional bug bounty programs where the plugin developer, let's say, or like open source vendor, they put their plugin into the program, and then if someone finds a security issue on their plugin, they pay for that effort, and then you kind of it's also like a transaction, kind of monetary transaction there. But that also doesn't help if the open source vendor doesn't have any business behind them and they are not able to pay those bounties. So in that sense, we were thinking like, how can we get that value to the entire open source ecosystem, starting from WordPress? What's the way how we could do that? So we basically started working on gamification, building the community, and making it more about contribution and rewarding the contribution rather than a single bounties. So that's why we are like leaderboard based. That's why we have like a monthly bounties for anyone who contributes, and it doesn't matter if the vendor pays you or not. That allows us to get security improved even on small plugins with 10,000 installations, and even if they don't have a business model behind that, or even if they don't are not willing to pay bounties, rather than just having basically security improved on like the big plugins that have like millions of installations and have a lot of money to pay for security.
Yeah, there's definitely a disparity between the open source projects, especially, and you can just look at the WordPress plugin repository for this. There are ones that have millions of installations, and those projects are greatly successful. They've got some sort of capitalist structure. They got a business model right behind them, so that they have money coming in and out of the projects, and they can run a bug bounty program no problem at all. In fact, they probably already have paid for a security audit in the past, or like they understand it as a business. But yeah, comparing them and assuming that applies across the board is not fair, because most open source projects, especially in the WordPress plugins repository, that are 100% free, they're just projects somebody built maybe in college. They wanted to prove that they could do something, and yeah, they don't have. There's no business behind it, right? It's just a single person, maybe a handful of people, and they mean well, but they don't have the ability to pay out bug bounties because there's frankly no money in their project that they've done, just out of the kindness of their heart, right? They are giving something to the whole community, right? Perhaps it's a contact form, a better design element, or something to WordPress site owners so they can improve their sites. But in turn, Patchstack is the first to come along and say, well, we're willing to help out too with this Patchstack Alliance. We're willing to pay the bounties, which incentivizes the security researchers to look for vulnerabilities. And something else that I know Patchstack Alliance does that you didn't touch on is that we do the validation of the reports. And this is a time saver for the developers, right? If they trust Patchstack Alliance's reports, and they understand that the Patchstack Alliance reports are, given by a competent individual, then they can save themselves a lot of time having to trying to understand what the security researcher was trying to explain to them, things like that. And there's complexities there.
There's also the thing that like they're historically speaking, and like even right now, even though it's getting better, there has been a lot of friction between ethical hackers and the developers, and I think this goes both ways, right? From one side, it's a question about responsibility in terms of on the code, but on the other side, it's also mostly about communication. So can also ethical hackers communicate what is actually wrong without or like in a good way, where it isn't like feeling like a threat, or like it doesn't feel like I completely suck as a developer, and in that sense, and I think this is what Patchstack Alliance does well as well, is that ethical hackers, there's like a lot of different people who are sending us reports, and these reports all look different. What we do is that when we take this information to vendor, we make sure that the vendor actually understands what the issue is there and how to fix that as well, and in a very professional way. I think this is, first of all, taking a lot of burden away from the ethical hackers themselves to be able to get in touch with the vendor, and like maybe eventually this, their report gets some attention. But it also is a very valuable for the vendor itself, because the vendor can filter out you know the poor quality reports, or in some cases even completely invalid reports.
Hmm. Yeah.
So I think, yeah, it basically helps both sides.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing, and I think that is one of those things that is an underreported or non-traditional way of helping, right? There's no
Mm.
structure out there explaining to everybody in open source that, hey, you should have a bug bounty program and you should work with a third-party company who manages bug bounty programs. Find one. Just go ahead and find one that doesn't charge you anything, as it doesn't charge the developers for managing the reports. So that's really cool. I mean, that's where Patchstack Alliance shines, is being something unique and different, and it's also a way that Patchstack is helping an entire community of underfunded, I guess I could say, projects I wouldn't normally be able to have access to. Bug bounty, being able to triage reports, validate reports, and clearly communicate issues in their projects. Uh, that's
I
a
think
nice, yeah,
there's another point that I wanted to make, because of when we talked about, like, some bigger plugins have, the business behind them, they have the revenue and they have the money to get security audited, and to invest in security. But what is important to understand is that even though one plugin has a business behind them and another one doesn't, that doesn't absolutely in any ways like make a big impact on, or like share the understanding of an impact, or like how to say, like, sometimes a free plugin that is completely free, maybe built by one guy or two guys, log4j, might have way more installations, or could
yep,
pose way bigger impact than a plugin that actually has monetary value, or like monetary program behind them, like a business going on and so on. And the impact that this two guy project that can actually make for the web can be incredibly big. I
yeah.
mean, we've seen that many times.
That gets me thinking about the idea of a development project where the developers and the only people involved are developers first, not business people first, right? And then there's a
Mm,
difference when the open source project needs a business person, right?
yeah,
So if they need a business person in order to have the business model behind the project to support it, that's just adding on extra layers. And I'm not against it, but it does change the perspective. If you can think of, well, what if this plugin only has, two contributors or four contributors, and why don't they deserve getting the similar level of help? And I think that's what Patchstack comes along. It simplifies, Patchstack Alliance specifically simplifies processes so that small teams don't have to first start a business so that they can have income to pay bug bounties, and then second start a security team so that they can manage the triage of bug bounties. So it gets rid of
yeah.
this whole necessity, and that really helps out. Maybe these smaller projects will become bigger, and they'll be able to put in the time later for a business model, and they can have great success in their life. But for the meantime, how much does this help, right? Like, I think it helps significantly the smaller projects compete with these bigger projects that just got there first and already have the market share and they've already got the income, and now some smaller projects can kind of help catch up a lot, especially when it comes to security, thanks to things like Patchstack Alliance. Are there any
I
other
think
ways? Yeah,
also
go ahead.
also in the I mean, if the security is improved now, when you have 1,000 installations
Yeah,
rather than when you have 1 million installations,
yeah,
I mean, that's a big difference as well, because sometimes the code base might not change in between when a plugin grows 2 times or 3 times, right?
yeah, yeah.
So it's always better to get it already from the get-go. But even the ones that you know are having business behind them might not yet afford it on the lower installation counts.
Mhm.
That's why usually only the bigger ones would get, like, attention on the security,
Yeah,
if they have bounties, or if they have like um, if they have cash basically to pay for the paid audits and so on.
yep.
But I think that they, like, in terms of like the like how the value eventually goes, on one side we have ethical hackers, right? Then we have developers, but or like, I mean, plugin developers specifically. but then there's the entire community of people who are using those plugins.
Yeah.
And that's where it's getting even more interesting.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. That it helps out just more and more each time. That's great. Now, are there any other ways that you may have helped an open source project, or seen some people interacting, helping open source projects in the past in untraditional ways?
I think when it comes, like I, from my own personal perspective, I think when I've been helping a open source project, that probably goes mostly through Patchstack, because that's where I just put, entirety of my time.
Mhm.
I guess through Hackerspace, like me personally, I haven't, I think, done so, but I know that the people there have been. But then again, like you can understand that even though you're like not directly writing code and making commits, that doesn't mean that you're not helping. You may lay ground for helpers to do the help and so on. So I think there's a lot of layers in play there. But yeah, I think mostly what I've been doing in terms of the open source, or like for example, like even on WordCamp, we organized on WordCamp Berlin in Europe. I think it was 2018, 2019 actually. We organized a WordPress security meetup, for example. We just kind of invested into it, invited people together to just have discussions with people to talk about security. And it was great to have like all those people there. Like there was like people from different security plugin owners. There was like all kinds of different people there, and I think these kind of things also go there into helping the community maybe to get awareness on the security matter.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. So you went to WordCamp Berlin. So you went to an event that has community already, or
Yeah.
some maybe online or in person. In this case, WordCamp Berlin is an in-person event. And you did a formal or informal thing. Did you get permission, or you just like, we're just going to talk about security here at this place?
Yeah, that's pretty much what we did. We basically we booked a bar quite close by,
Yep.
and we printed some leaflets, and then just started writing to people we knew from the community that, hey, this day after the main program, we are all gathering on the bar. We had like open tap, and
Oh,
let's
that's how
just
you
have a
get the
chat.
people to show up.
Exactly.
I think it works
That
double,
always
right?
works.
First it'll encourage people to show up. Second, it'll encourage people to talk.
Yeah, true. The
So
talking it has a small delay, but it still works.
yeah. Anyway, so and then you get people together, and this is something, because what I've seen too is the WordPress community. Not to be negative too much, but there's not a lot of discussion about security. A lot of it happens behind closed doors. It's very non-transparent. It's these decisions were made, and there's no real formal public security team. There's no. I think in WordCamp Europe there was a security team meetup though, but that was 2018 or 2017. I want to say
Okay.
it was some time ago,
Well,
and I haven't seen much.
The WordCamp Europe that was now in Porto, where we had quite a big bunch of our team there as well. I think this time there was like 2 security talks actually, which was quite surprising, because last time on last WordCamp Europe that was in Berlin, there was just one security related talk, and this was a lightning talk. So it was like just 10 or 15 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Which wasn't really about WordPress either. So yeah, it's. I hope what we're seeing is that this becomes more and more an open topic that people discuss, and that is getting. I mean, it is a stigmatized thing a little bit. So I hope this gets more and more kind of free thing, or like a free topic to discuss.
Yeah, it is certainly the topic that is non like public. It's trying to be always hidden, always quelled, and there may be good reason to it. I think there's been journalists in the past who are quick to try to get a clickbait title. They want to say the most popular content management system on the web is insecure, and that will obviously get the most number of clicks, but they're not really, I don't think that they're particularly helping, I guess, in the sense that they're communicating to the users that if you're running this insecure thing, you should update. But their form and their application, like how they apply this knowledge and share it with others, is very much you said the word friction earlier, and I think that's a good way to phrase it. There's a lot of friction involved, whereas they're just telling people how bad the development process went. Patchstack Alliance kind of in turn says it's going to be part of the development process, where it's there to communicate clearly privately as well, right? There's no full Patchstack Alliance is not full disclosure for no reason. There's a documented vulnerability disclosure process, and it's shared so that there's clear expectations from both parties, right? Like if Patchstack Alliance reaches out to a developer, like we expect responses within certain time frames and that are reasonable. And we have a question from Mart. So we'll get to that in a quick second. But yeah, how it helps out is by reducing a lot of those problems that people previously had. And Mart's question was, what is a practical tip for reducing the friction when communicating security issues to a developer or for a developer? So do you have any thoughts on that, Oliver?
I think this is a question that you should answer, because you've been working on that a lot in Patchstack as well. So maybe you can give that an answer.
Yeah, a lot of it's going to come down to communication, is what I would say. So if you want to reduce friction, communication is key, and that's much more than do communication. You need to understand communication, understand the other person, be empathetic towards what their situation is, right? Understand that while they should be, right, I can feel if I find a bug in another person's. Let me use an analogy, actually. Let's say we're driving down the road, and there's a car driving by, and I'm a mechanic. I'm a professional mechanic, and I see something that's inherently wrong with that car, where it's going to like the wheel is wobbling and it's going to fall off. Like, I need to communicate that clearly to the driver who's not aware of the issue. And I have to do it nicely so that the driver basically doesn't freak out and get defensive, like I'm a crazy guy on the street yelling at his car, banging on his window, right? There's two ways to do it. One could be I can wave him down, introduce myself, make clear my expertise, and say, you have this exact problem. This problem will lead to this issue, right? Your wheel is wobbly. It may fall off and you'll have an accident. Or, the other way is more friction filled, would be if I ran up to the guy's car, banged on his window, and I said, your car is going to be in an accident. He doesn't understand. I missed a whole step there explaining what the problem was. I just told him what the issue at the end, what the negative thing will be, and that person will basically freak out, think I'm a crazy person, and might just drive along and then get in an accident. Then they'll understand what the series of events that led up to it was. So a lot of it is frankly, clear communication, empathetic communication, understanding the other person's perspective. Security researcher who reports a bug should not expect a bug fix within a day. And if you do get a bug fix within a day, which I've seen, it's phenomenal. You should be really boosting up their morale. Like, hey, that was awesome. Like, I didn't expect you would do this so fast. But most of it is about clearly communicating. And that has to happen in that first email that's out of the blue. And I know the security researchers have done a lot of the work, and they're the ones with the knowledge, and you just had to communicate it. And maybe later we can talk about what happens when the friction goes bad, but that's more of a discussion for another episode entirely. So let's move on to talking again about communities, right? Building communities is something you've done. You understand the importance of communities. I'm assuming that you're part of some communities online, and obviously. And so what are the most helpful communities that you've been a part of, either online or in person?
I think WordPress community itself is quite good in terms of for example, in Facebook, there's a lot of Facebook groups, right? So there's one particular Facebook group where there's probably the most helpful bunch of people, and there's a lot of engagement going on, which is called the admin bar. And these are a bunch of people who are freelancers, agencies who are building websites, helping each other out. And to be actually Adrian, who is in Patchstack helping us on the front end, I met him there. So there's already this value of meeting people who are helping each other out, and this can over time even turn into a professional relationship. I think the other one that I would probably bring out is Post Status. Post Status has grown a lot over I would say, past 6 months. It was way smaller when I got there, and probably was even smaller, before that. But over the past 6 months, I've been seeing it grow really, really rapidly. And it is nice to see that you can like have communicate, or like you can get in touch with people directly that are they are either plugin developers themselves, or they are the founders of the companies in the space, and
Yeah.
who are making the kind of who are making impact in the WordPress ecosystem.
Yeah.
But outside of WordPress, I would say like I think the micro communities are also very interesting in terms of like, I mean, there's the co-working space that I built, for example, like the community around that co-working space, the people that are live in the same town with me, the people who are like pushing with building their own businesses, or just working remotely maybe. And like in Estonia in general, like we have like a very strong startup community thing. So I think these micro communities that are gathered around like a common goal, or like maybe sometimes common struggle, which I would call in terms of founders communities. These are very interesting, and they are very inspiring, because you often see that the problems that you are facing are not special at all, even though you first might think so.
Mhm.
And it helps a lot to put kind of perspective in the right place.
Nice. That's great. So we're getting close to the end of the time here, and I have one major question for you. We've talked a lot about WordPress space, security, open source security, but we really focused on WordPress. And this is a question I think is the top question. Everybody, just as a user of WordPress, and everybody as a developer, and everybody who's part of the community, would love to hear from you. And that's simply, is WordPress secure?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think this quite like every time you ask this question from anyone, you always get a different answer.
Hmm.
So I'll make sure to give a different one as well. I think WordPress is as secure as we make it. And why I say that is because WordPress itself, it isn't like WordPress core itself isn't the WordPress that we are that everyone is using and seeing. WordPress, as people think about WordPress, is WordPress the content management system plus all the plugins and
Yeah.
everything and themes and everything that is being used on top of those. Now that and if you think about that in that way, then the question about whether it's secure or not starts to depend very much. I mean, it depends on all those things, that like who built this website, what is being installed on top of that, who built all those things that are installed on top of that, and how do you even take care of the site yourself, and so on. So there's just so many layers. I guess like the common answer usually is given is that the core itself is a mature product, and it's relatively secure in terms of its processes. There's a company behind it that is or like, it's a wrong way to say company behind it, but there's a community and a company behind it who is also investing into making it more secure. There is kind of a security team there as well. So I think in terms of that, WordPress core itself gets a lot of attention as well, if you compare it with a small plugin that can be installed. But
Yeah.
then again, like if you take just the WordPress core, which is getting a lot of attention in terms of security, but now you install like a small 10,000 installation plugin there that has never received any attention in terms of security,
Yeah.
then we can't talk about in the same way anymore.
Yeah.
So it is very relative. But how would you answer that question?
Well, I get to answer that question. Okay.
I wish I had like the Uno reverse card right now.
The reverse of wherever. Yeah, that'd be. Maybe I should give that to the guests. So I'll let them
Yeah,
do the
definitely.
reverse one time, so I have to answer. So is WordPress
Yeah.
secure? That's all relative to who I'm talking to, right? Am I talking to the developer? Am I talking to a site owner? Right? Am I talking to somebody who doesn't even know how the WordPress got installed? They think they're using Shopify or something like that. They don't know the difference, and they're just looking for. A lot of the times, you can imagine this big map of people, right? Hosting providers are in there too. Agencies who manage sites for multiple customers are in there too, right? Because these are all the people in any way, shape, or form depend on a product, and that product is WordPress. And they're going to say, and of course, like you mentioned, WordPress is not just core. WordPress is an ecosystem. It's this whole thing. And it goes beyond even just the plugins in the plugins repository. There are third-party vendors selling plugins. Invanto, Code Canyon, right? They are places you can go to purchase plugins that are a little bit different than the standard, but they're still deserving of security and things like that. And what you mentioned earlier is that, yeah, when you start adding in these things from the ecosystem to WordPress, be it via plugins, or for the hosting providers, right? They've got to manage, like, look at all their configurations for Apache, Nginx, and their stack. Can it be secure? Absolutely, but only when somebody's taking responsibility. I think that's how I would answer that in the easiest, simplest way, is that as long as somebody's taking responsibility, it can be as secure as anything else. And that's really true for everything. You can only run Windows 98 for so long. Eventually, they stop supporting it. You won't get security patches anymore. Same as I use 98 because I've dated myself. But I think Windows ME and Windows NT and Windows 2000 and a few other releases are all out of date now, and they no longer receive security patches. You can't use those because there's no way to keep it secure. It's Microsoft's responsibility to keep Windows operating system secure, and they do with their most recent releases. With WordPress, it's the same. The WordPress core has a team. They keep their core software secure. They receive security bugs in a very mature way via vulnerability disclosure program.
And they have a bug bounty program as well.
They pay bug bounties because they're managed. They have a business entity behind them that can pay for those bounties. But those small plugins, when you're looking at the website, those small plugins, they don't have those same resources. But they doesn't mean that they don't put in the effort, right? A lot of those small plugins have security patches, right? A lot of the small plugins are doing their best, and they're doing great, to tell you the truth. But when that plugin is abandoned, or if the developer of the plugin wasn't capable of doing security patches in a timely way, then yeah, those plugins will. I think there just needs to be a way for site owners to know when those plugins are insecure, so that the site owners or the agencies or the hosting provider can take action and tell the site, the user, the person who wasn't paying attention, that hey, you need to update. And that's actually something that we could end on, is something that Patchstack does, right?
It's so good segue that you could even put an ad on top of it, like a Patchstack ad.
For a fair warning, this entire thing is sponsored by Patchstack, so we can.
In case you didn't notice the logo.
Yeah, so we can always end on, yeah, by the way, Patchstack does solve that problem for agencies, for hosting providers, and for site owners directly, to inform them when their site has a known security vulnerability in it, and they can take the action they need to secure their site from a hack, so they don't have to pay for a hack cleanup later. They can just stop the hack from being successful in the first place. I think that's it, unless we have any other questions from the audience, or if you have anything else you wanted to add, Oliver.
I think we're clear. Actually, yeah, I really enjoyed that talk, and I'm very excited to see all the people that we are going to have on the show in the future, and all these helpers are in the community, and all these different profiles of people who are helping in all those different ways. So I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, I should definitely add in now that if you are a helper yourself, or somebody who has helped you out, or a project out, an open source project, specifically open source web applications, it doesn't have to be about security. Obviously, that's where our expertise is. But anybody who's helped out these projects in any ways, please reach out. We want to hear from you and from anybody who has a story about helping, especially a story that has not been told or is non-traditional. That way people can see the many different ways that they can help out in their communities, with other people online in the ecosystem, WordPress or open source, things like that. Thank you very much to Oliver for sharing your time with us, and I'll be signing out here.
All right. See you soon.
See ya. Bye.